Welcome back to the Enlightening Books Podcast, your go-to source for discovering thought-provoking and illuminating reads. We explore books which inspire personal growth, challenge conventional wisdom, and expand the boundaries of human knowledge.
Okay, so magic. We're diving into a whole bunch of your sources on this. Looks like we've got grimoires, we've got modern theories. You want the inside scoop, right? Not just a poof and it's magic kind of thing.
You hit the nail on the head. What's fascinating is how different people see magic, how it's been practiced. Your sources show that beautifully, this whole spectrum of belief.
I'm seeing that already. One source breaks it down into 5 models, like frameworks for understanding. Psychological, energy, spirit, information, quantum, and ritual itself, can't forget that. Plus, we're time traveling. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece. It's a history buffet.
Those models are key. Think of them as lenses, Each one gives you a different view of how magic actually works.
Yeah, right, like tools for understanding. So psychological, that's got to be the mind over matter, the secret kind of thing. Your thoughts shape your reality, almost like programming a computer.
Exactly. It's all about that unconscious mind power. Using symbols, rituals, focused intention. You can tap into that to change your life, reprogram those beliefs. Ever get stuck on a negative thought? This model says you can rewrite that code.
It's like willing things into existence almost. Then there's the energy model. That's about what? Invisible forces flowing through everything, like chakras, Reiki, that sort of thing.
Exactly. The universe is this web of energy, right? And with enough focus, the right actions, a magician can actually manipulate those energies. They can change them inside and out, even affect the world around them.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The spirit model. We're talking about invoking beings outside of ourselves. Gods, spirits, ancestors. Think ancient Egypt, shamanism, that kind of thing.
Right. This model says the universe is full of spirits, and magicians can interact with them, even collaborate. Invocation, evocation, offerings. It all falls under this model.
Collaborating with spirits. Now that's intense. Then we jump into the information model. Very modern, right? The universe is a computer program, and magic is basically hacking the code. Sounds like the Matrix to me.
Very Matrix. It connects magic to information theory. Manipulate the information, symbols, even your core beliefs, and you might change reality. But unlike chaos magic, which we'll get to later, this model is about a more structured approach to magic.
Rewriting the universe's code. It's mind-blowing. And finally, there's the quantum model. This one feels almost like science fiction, but it's connected to actual physics, right? Consciousness actually making choices about which possibilities become real.
That's it. Reality is just a bunch of possibilities, and our consciousness gets to choose. It's a fascinating idea that sparks a lot of debate, for sure.
So we've got these models, but it's not like you have to pick one and stick with it, right?
Absolutely not. A lot of practitioners blend them depending on what they're doing, the tradition they follow. The important thing is that these models help us make sense of how magic has been used throughout history. Speaking of which, ready for a whirlwind tour?
Absolutely. I've got my eye on this hepatoscopy thing. Divination with animal livers. Now that's next level intuition.
It's not as weird as it sounds. See, in Mesopotamia, where this was practiced, the liver was seen as the core of the soul.
So what were they looking for? Specific shapes, markings, good or bad omens?
Patterns, basically. A smooth lobe might mean good luck. A bumpy one, maybe trouble's coming, like people reading tea leaves or clouds today, trying to find meaning.
Finding meaning in the random? Seeing the hidden order, like a secret language of the universe.
Exactly. And speaking of deciphering things, Mesopotamia also gave us the first grimoires, ancient spell books, often written on clay tablets in cuneiform, like magic cheat sheets from back in the day.
Ancient cheat sheets. What kind of spells are we talking about?
You name it, they had it. Protection, healing, curses, love spells, weather spells, even spells for a good harvest. It seemed like they had a spell for everything.
Talk about covering all the bases. I'm guessing not everyone had these lying around, though. Clay tablets weren't exactly mass-produced.
You're right. Access was probably limited to the elite, the priests and scribes who could read. But some knowledge definitely spread through word of mouth, family traditions.
Makes sense. Okay, Mesopotamia to ancient Egypt. Fast forward. We talked about the Book of the Dead, but let's go deeper. Their magic was really tied to their religion, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was all about maintaining Mat, that cosmic order that kept everything in balance. The Egyptians believed that doing the right rituals, using the right spells, that kept Mat flowing, appeased the gods and kept chaos away.
And talk about gods. They had one for everything, each with their own powers.
Right, and magicians would call on specific gods depending on what they wanted. Isis was big for healing and protection, while Thoth was all about wisdom and magic. And speaking of mysteries, the ancient Greeks had their own version with the Eleusinian mysteries.
Like a divine specialist for every need. But hold on, before we jump to Greece, what about amulets? Egyptians loved those, right?
Huge part of their world. Worn for protection, luck, to channel a god's power. The scarab beetle, for example, was huge for rebirth, transformation.
So cool. And of course, we can't forget the pyramids. Giant tombs, sure. But was there a magical aspect to them too?
Well, they were tombs for the pharaohs, yeah, but designed with this deep knowledge of astronomy, sacred geometry. Some believed they were like giant energy channels linking Earth and the spiritual realms.
Wow, giant power generators for the soul. Okay, now I'm ready for Greece and these Eleusinian mysteries. What were they all about?
Picture this. Secret rituals every year, honoring Demeter and Persephone, the goddesses of agriculture and the underworld. They were very hush-hush.
Secret rituals, hush-hush. Sounds like a real exclusive club. Do we even know what went on in there?
We get glimpses from old writings and art, but a lot of it's still a mystery. Again, I guess makes it even more intriguing, right?
Yeah.
From what we can tell, initiates went through this symbolic journey, like going down into the underworld and reuniting with the goddess. It's supposed to represent death and rebirth.
Like an ancient Greek play, but designed to give you this intense spiritual experience. So they have special effects, music.
Oh, I bet they pulled out all the stops. Storytelling, music, dancing, maybe even something to alter their state of mind. Who knows? The possibilities are pretty wild when you think about it.
Now that's what I call immersive theater. It's amazing how these ancient cultures could blend spirituality, ritual, even entertainment to create these life-changing experiences.
It really is. And speaking of transformation, let's talk about Hermeticism. This school of thought popped up in late antiquity and had a huge influence on Western magic.
Hermeticism. Okay, that's based on Hermes Trismegistus, right? Wasn't that guy like the ultimate mystical rock star?
That's the one, Hermes Trismegistus. This mythical sage, kind of a mashup of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth. Talk about a double dose of wisdom and magic. And the Hermetic texts, like the Corpus Hermeticum, covered everything: alchemy, astrology, theurgy, even the art of connecting with the divine.
A mix of Greek philosophy and Egyptian mysticism. Sounds like a potent cocktail of ancient knowledge.
You got it.
Yeah.
And it went on to influence tons of later magical systems, especially during the Renaissance. Guys like Marsilio Ficino, who translated the Corpus Hermeticum, really brought those old teachings back into the spotlight.
The Renaissance. A time of rediscovering the past, pushing the boundaries of art, science. Makes sense magic would have a comeback too.
Exactly. A time for exploring new ideas, both intellectual and spiritual. Alchemy, especially, really grabbed people's imaginations back then. It wasn't just about turning lead into gold. It was about understanding the hidden forces of nature, the potential for transformation, both in the world and within yourself.
That reminds me of Isaac Newton. Considered one of the fathers of modern science, but he was super into alchemy, wasn't he?
Big time. Newton spent years poring over alchemical texts, convinced they held the secrets of the universe. It shows how science and magic weren't always seen as separate back then, not like today.
And speaking of fascinating figures from that era, we've got to talk about John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's personal astrologer and magician. Now, there was a character. Wasn't he obsessed with talking to angels?
Oh yeah, Dee was deep into the occult. He truly believed he could talk to angels through scrying. Picture it. Late nights, candlelight, Dee hunched over his crystal ball or obsidian mirror, searching for angelic wisdom. Talk about staring at a screen all day. He would fit right in with today's tech obsession.
Ha, no kidding. But seriously, did he ever actually have a chat with an angel? What came of all that scrying?
He was convinced he did. He worked with this scryer named Edward Kelly, who claimed he saw visions, got messages from the angels. They even created a whole language together, supposedly dictated by the angels, Enochian.
Enochian? Seriously, so they were taking dictation from angels. Do we know what these messages said, what the angels were after?
They claimed it was a super powerful system of magic being revealed to them. And get this, people still study and practice Enochian magic today, trying to decode its symbols and rituals.
It's like something out of a Dan Brown novel. From ancient Egyptian ceremonies to angelic languages. The deeper we go, the more I realize how much we don't know.
That's the best part. Every answer just leads to more questions, especially as we get closer to modern times.
And speaking of moving forward, all this talk of angelic languages and rituals makes me think of ceremonial magic. That came later, didn't it?
Yep. Ceremonial magic, with all its elaborate rituals, invocations, and complex systems. It took inspiration from those earlier traditions we've been talking about, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, you name it.
So they were taking those ancient pieces of magical knowledge, Egyptian, Greek, even Mesopotamian, and creating something new, refining the techniques, adding their own interpretations.
Exactly. And it kept evolving, especially during the 19th century, a really important time for the occult. We see figures like Eliphas Levi pop up, and his writings had a huge impact on how magic was viewed. He's the one who popularized that classic image of the magician, the cloaked figure with the mysterious powers.
I can see it now. The pointed hat, the mysterious symbols, it's like something out of a movie. What was it about Levi's work that really struck a chord?
His book, Transcendental Magic, was a game changer. He presented magic as a science, a way to actually understand and control those hidden forces of nature. He put a lot of emphasis on symbolism and ritual, things that are still huge in modern magic today.
And his work really laid the groundwork for groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, right? They were like the ultimate secret magical society, weren't they? Secret handshakes and everything.
Maybe not quite that theatrical, but they did have ranks and initiation rituals, kind of like those ancient mystery schools. You moved up the ranks as you gained knowledge and experience.
And some big names in modern magic came out of the Golden Dawn, right? People like Aleister Crowley and Arthur Edward Wade.
You got it. Both were members, but they eventually went their separate ways, each one forging their own path in the world of magic. Crowley became famous for his, or some would say controversial philosophy of Thelema, and of course for exploring the darker side of magic.
Crowley was definitely a complex figure. So we've gone from ancient liver readings and trying to chat with angels to Crowley's Thelema. What a trip. But what about those other magical practices? You mentioned astrology, sound magic, ancestor work. Where do they fit in all of this?
Those practices have always been around, sometimes front and center, sometimes more in the background. Astrology, for example, has been used for centuries to time magical rituals, choose the right moment for a spell, understand how planetary energies are at play.
We talked about planetary hours earlier, right? Picking the perfect time to do your magic based on the energy of a certain planet. I always thought that was fascinating, syncing up with the cosmos like that.
Exactly. It's about working with those larger forces, using their energy to make your magic even more potent. Astrology is also a huge part of those birth charts, those maps of the stars at the moment you were born that some people believe reveal your personality and your destiny.
I'll admit, those have always intrigued me. What about sound magic? It seems like that's been around forever, whether it's ancient chants or modern music.
The power of sound is undeniable. Think about mantras in Hinduism and Buddhism, chanting in various religions, even rhythmic drumming in shamanic traditions. Sound can shift your consciousness, connect you to something bigger, and maybe even affect the world around you.
Like sound waves are a key that can unlock different levels of reality. And in some cultures, even the names of deities are super sacred, used in very specific ways in rituals.
Oh, absolutely. The power of words is huge in so many magical traditions. Words create, they heal, they can even destroy. They have a vibration and energy that can influence the world around us.
And then there's ancestor work. I find that one particularly fascinating. It's not about spooky seances or anything, but about honoring those who came before you, seeking wisdom from your lineage.
It's a practice you find all over the world, with ancestors acting as protectors, guides, offering wisdom and support from the other side.
We talked about different ways to connect with them, from making offerings at altars to using divination to receive messages. It seems like very personal, powerful stuff.
It is. It reminds us we're part of something bigger than ourselves, this whole web of interconnected lives. It's about recognizing how our ancestors' experiences, their wisdom, can guide us and support us in our own lives.
From deciphering the universe to connecting with our ancestors, we've covered so much ground here. But we still haven't touched on the more controversial aspects of magic, like baneful magic, protection, curses, hexes, all that juicy stuff that always gets people talking.
Now, those are definitely areas where ethics are absolutely crucial. We're talking about the ability to influence others, for better or worse, and that's not something to take lightly.
It seems like that's the perfect place to pick up in our final dive into this topic. After all, what's a good exploration without venturing into those shadowy corners? All right, so we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into magic. We've gone through the history, the different ways of understanding it, the practices, but now it's time for the stuff that always gets people going. Baneful magic, protection, curses, hexes, the real mystical fireworks. ready to light the fuse.
Let's do it. These are the areas where ethics are key, right? We're talking about potentially influencing others for good or bad, and that's not something to mess around with.
Exactly. It's serious stuff. And our sources mention baneful magic spells and rituals meant to cause harm. Some people might say that all magic is neutral, but this seems pretty direct, wouldn't you say? Like, you're aiming to send negative energy at someone.
It really boils down to intent. Some traditions might use it for things like justice or self-defense, while others say absolutely not, it's forbidden. Lots of gray areas there.
Speaking of gray areas, there are curses and hexes meant to bring bad luck or even harm someone. Our sources mention things like poppets, those dolls that represent a person, to focus that negative energy.
Poppets are a great example of sympathetic magic. The idea that if you can affect something that represents something else, you affect the real thing too. And in this case, it's about causing harm.
Like those voodoo dolls you see, sticking pins in them. But it's not all dolls and pins, right? It can get a lot more intense. Our sources say baneful magic can involve calling on dark spirits, deities of destruction, that's getting into dangerous territory.
It can be, for sure. In some traditions, you might ask specific entities to do your bidding, whether it's for revenge, punishment, or just getting rid of something that's in your way.
Okay, that's where I start to get a little spooked. What's stopping those spirits from turning on the magician who called them up? Isn't that kind of like playing with fire?
That's where knowing your stuff comes in. Experience, knowledge, and being able to protect yourself are crucial. Ceremonial magicians, for instance, use protective circles, specific words of power, banishing rituals, that sort of thing, to stay in control.
Like being a mystical lion tamer, you've got to be ready for anything. But let's switch gears for a sec. What about protection magic? Is that basically the opposite of baneful magic?
You could say that.
Yeah.
It's about shielding yourself from negative stuff, creating a barrier, whether it's physical or energetic, to keep harm away. Amulets, talismans, even big rituals to cleanse a space or a person of negativity, it's all protection.
Right. Our sources talk about using salt to purify, creating wards to deflect negative energy, even calling on protective deities or spirits. It's like you're building your own mystical fortress.
Exactly. But it's interesting how protection magic can sometimes cross over into baneful magic territory. Like, think about a mirror shield, something that sends negative energy back to where it came from. It's defensive, but it could also be used offensively, right?
So even if you're protecting yourself, depending on how it's done, it could still end up hurting someone. Which brings us back to those ethical questions. Even in self-defense, is it okay to harm someone else, even if they were the ones who started it?
Tough one. And then there's the idea of karma actions have consequences. Even if you're sending out negative energy for protection, it could come back around to bite you later.
It's not just about the here and now, but the ripple effects. That's a lot of responsibility to carry.
And that's exactly why ethics are so important when it comes to magic. It's not just about what you can do, but what you should do.
Yeah, and our sources seem to agree it all comes down to personal responsibility. Magic is powerful, and it's up to each person to use it ethically.
It's all about personal transformation, really. Always questioning, always growing.
So as we close the chapter on this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to keep in mind as they explore the world of magic?
Approach it with respect, curiosity, and a good dose of healthy skepticism. Don't just accept everything you read. Ask questions, look at things from different angles, and figure out what magic means to you.
And don't shy away from the big questions. Where you draw the line ethically? How will you make sure you're using this knowledge responsibly? What are you hoping to find on this journey?
Those are the questions that will be your guide. Remember, magic is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, more to experience, more to discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. If you are going to dive into a magical practice, which model, which tradition really speaks to you and why? Something to ponder as you continue your own deep dive into the world of magic. Thanks for coming along for the ride.